All right, joining us now is Deonna Purrazzo. You know, we love having the pro wrestlers on the show here. You see Deonna on AEW. Sometimes you got the indie bookings down here as well, CCW, BRCW. You'll see her name pop up. And joining us here now on Zaslow Show 2.0 is Deonna Purrazzo, who has a new show, new podcast, I believe, right? Boots to Boots with her husband, who, of course, is Steve Macklin, who we also know. Deonna, thanks for joining us now. First up, tell me about the new podcast here that you're doing with your husband.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. So Boots to Boots debuts this Monday, September 15th. Anywhere you can get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. And basically I presented Steve with this rough concept of what if we did a podcast that talked about your transition from being in the Marine Corps to being a civilian and what that struggle is. And I felt like the struggle you went through, most people go through transitioning from maybe it's one job to another, it's out of college into the real world, it's from pro sports to writing books or being an entrepreneur. Like that identity crisis is something everybody goes through, but nobody talks about. And what if we had a podcast where we talked about that? And he is, I love him to death because he's just like, if that's what you want to do, sweetheart. But once we got into the meat and bones of it, he's like, I really, really think this is great. And we can, of course, reach the veteran community, which is so close to our heart. But I think we can reach a lot of people outside of that as well.
Yeah, so is it going to be you interviewing him each week? Will you have other former, service members and, talk about their everyday life as well on the show?
Yeah, so we want to make it a mix of everything. We filmed right now the first 4 episodes are ready to go. So mainly that's me interviewing Steve the first 2 weeks, talking about, episode 1 is the combat boots, his boots. And then episode 2 will be his wrestling boots and what that transition was like. And then we flipped the script and he asked me about my wrestling boots and what my journey's been like to get where I'm at. And then episode 4 kind of talks about us both and why we're here, why we want to do this, what we're hoping to achieve with Boots to Boots. But then we're hoping, yeah, let's talk to other professional wrestlers who were in the military and had that same transition. Let's talk to pro athletes who now, are best-selling authors, or, we have a ton of wrestling friends who are no longer in-ring competitors but are backstage as producers or agents. I think that it can be a combination of all those things. It could be us talking to each other as husband and wife, but then also reaching out to our communities and saying, hey, let's tell your story and let's tell people what it was like for you and what helped you make that transition successfully.
Have you learned anything new about him that you didn't already know?
Um, the last few weeks even outside of the podcast I learned that he's claustrophobic. And I learned that he does not like olives, which I had no idea. But I
That's
also
weird.
think that he has just such a great outlook on life, and he's always positive, and he's always just like, it is what it is. We'll see what happens. And I think that people hearing his story more than just I was a machine gunner in the Marine Corps, how the experiences he went through in the Marine Corps really shaped him to be the man and the wrestler he is, and everything we're doing outside of wrestling with the veteran community is all in his honor. I'm just happy to be there for the ride and to be supportive of a community that I feel like doesn't necessarily have a lot of people's support. And so, just to see him be able to be in that element and embrace it fully, because it's not something he's always been willing to do, has been really exciting for me professionally and in our relationship as his wife.
That's awesome. So he was a Marine. He's a real tough guy. All right. And I get it. I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. So I know everyone in the pro wrestling business, for the most part, is very tough. But he's like a real tough guy. Who are some other male or female that will be in the locker room that you've seen in the locker room like, oh, they're a legit tough guy?
Um, the first person that came to mind is Frankie Kazarian. I just feel like he's crazy and you never know what's going to come out of his mouth. And like, that is just someone I would not want to mess with. Um, Josh Alexander, who's a really, really great friend of mine and Steve's, is another guy who is really just like straight laced and tough and like believes in what he believes in, is loves when he loves, but is not someone I would want to mess with.
What is the best and the worst part about being a pro wrestler?
I think For me, the best part is this is the only job I've ever wanted. I get to go and live my dream every single time I'm in a professional wrestling ring. And so that's the best part for me. Being in front of the audience, being able to do the actual wrestling is incredible. I think the worst part is that our schedule changes, and sometimes you think you have the weekend off and you find out, 12 hours before you have to be somewhere that you have to be somewhere. And so I think that as I've been older, that dynamic of like constantly being on call has been gives me a lot of anxiety.
I used to love, I've been having pro wrestlers on my show, even when I was doing live radio, had them on my show for many years now. And I used to love asking the question, hey, because I knew what the schedule is like, especially for wrestlers who work for WWE. I knew what your schedule was like, and I would like them to explain to the audience how crazy the schedule is. But the schedule, and especially now with someone like you who's in AEW, the schedule is not so crazy anymore, right?
Yeah, yeah. I feel like, back in the 90s, they always talked about we were working 350 days a year. We didn't have a day off. And I think that it's actually a really great thing that we have some more time off now. I think that all the companies, whether it's WWE, whether it's AEW, whether it's TNA, really embraces the fact that like these people have families and real lives outside of here and want to set us up for success also outside of wrestling. So there's not we're not wrestling 7 days a week anymore. Maybe we're wrestling 2 days a week. At AEW, our schedule is Wednesdays and Saturdays. So those would be the 2 days. If you were going to wrestle 2 days a week, it would be that. Obviously WWE schedule can be a little bit more crazier. They've done a ton of, overseas shows that's keeping people, out of the country for, sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's 2 weeks at a time. But also giving talent the downtime to explore the cities they're in and do the touristy, things that they want to do. So it's that balance, right?
When you were doing like full time indie circuit, what did a week look like for you?
Oh my gosh. I talk about this often. There was like a 2 week period that always sticks out in my brain. And I think it was like the end of 2017, maybe beginning of 2018, like that January. I went to England for New Year's. On New Year's Day, flew to Japan for Wrestle Kingdom, was there for 3 days, flew back to London, wrestled in a 2 day tournament for Rev Pro, flew back to New Jersey where I was living at the time. Maybe I was home for like, let's just say it was like a Wednesday, Thursday. Friday, I flew out and did like Wrestle Circus in Texas. Saturday, I flew right from Texas to California and did a show in California, and then flew home to Jersey. And, so like, for some reason that time frame sticks out where I was like, I was home maybe 2 days a week, and I couldn't work my job anymore. Wrestling became my full-time job. I was doing Ring of Honor. I was contracted there at the time. So a lot of my weekends were booked, in Detroit, in Maryland, down here in Florida. But yeah, just it was really crazy then because I could be in Texas on a Friday, California on a Saturday, New York on a Sunday.
And so, how was there not a night where you just felt, I don't have it in me tonight?
Every night. But I think that that's where the love of it comes from. That's where this is all I've ever wanted to do. Like, you don't have a choice. I scheduled myself to be here and I'm going to dig down deep and find it within myself to give these fans 100%. And I think when you walk through the curtain as a wrestler, it's contagious. They're excited to see you. You have music playing. Sometimes you have pyro in the background. And it's like, it doesn't matter what's going on at home. It doesn't matter, the nagging injuries or that you didn't get any sleep last night or your seat didn't recline on the plane or you haven't eaten in 12 hours. It's just that excitement of like, ooh, I get to perform that pushes us all through.
You said something really interesting. I think it was recently that I read. I'm hoping it was you. I think it was where you were responding to a fan who wanted to see you more on the main show on AEW pay-per-views, and I guess they were responding to how you were on the kickoff show, so you weren't on the main feed, and you
Mhm.
responded with you love doing the kickoff show, the pre-show, and I thought
Yeah.
your answer was so interesting because you're getting a fresh crowd, a hot crowd who has all the energy and is just ready to have a great night. I thought that was such an interesting answer.
Thank you, and I 100% meant it. I've been on a couple of the Ring of Honor, not Ring of Honor, the AEW 0 Hour shows that they put on, and that's exactly how I feel. It's a fresh crowd who is just excited to see professional wrestling, and I feel like a lot of times women get put in the spot of like, we're gonna put you, semi-main, but that means, going after Will Ospreay. That means performing after
Yeah.
Swerve. That, sometimes meant performing after Bryan Danielson. There is nothing that I can do that is better than those three people, right? And those are just three people off the top of my head. We have an entire roster full of amazing athletes. And so, and sometimes the women's story just doesn't, stand up to what the men's story has been. And so then we're automatically being put in a position to fail. But if I could be the pre-show where I don't have to go out there and pull out every single trick that I have, I can give them a good solid 10-minute wrestling match that tells a great story, gets them excited to see the rest of the show, and they're chanting this is awesome and I've done a wrist lock, then my job is done, And also too, like, we're showing, I think, someone who's been around as long as I have now is showing younger talent like it's not a position to be ashamed of. It's not a position that you don't want to be in. You can try things. You know what I mean? Like, it's just it is way more freeing to me to be on the pre-show sometimes than it is to have the pressure to go after some of the incredible athletes that are on our show.
It's pretty amazing how far women's wrestling has come these days. I mean, like Deonna, I've been watching wrestling, since I was a little boy, late 80s. And, when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, when the women's match would come on, because, there'd only be one, so it was a women's match. There weren't women's matches. When the one women's match came on, that was bathroom break time.
Yeah.
And now the women all across pro wrestling, unbelievable, phenomenal.
Yeah, I did an interview a couple months ago with Sean Kelly, and he's not a wrestling fan. We were at a poker tournament, and he's like, "Hey, you want to talk?" And he said he went to WrestleMania, and the best match, in his opinion, of the night was Rhea versus Bianca versus Io,
It's one of the
and
best
that
matches I've
like
ever seen.
I was just like, and women did that. I had a few drinks while we were talking, but I was like, women did that. And regardless if it was my match or not, like, I'm so proud to see that a non-wrestling fan went to WrestleMania and said the women were the best. And I think that, tying it back to AEW, like where I'm at now is I want to see women get to that point. I want to see us main event a pay-per-view. I want to see more stories being told. I want to see more matches from the women on these cards, and I think that people like to compare all the companies, but it took TNA 20 years to have women be in the main event of a pay-per-view, and I'm so grateful that I got to do that for Mickey James. I got to be the first ever Knockouts World Championship pay-per-view main event, but it took 20 years. And so I think fans get on AEW for like, we need more women, and they want it now, but it's like, it will come with time if you just are patient and keep supporting us. And it's come with, we're talking about 30 years from when there was one match and it was a bathroom break to where we are now. So it's just a matter of keep supporting us, like putting your voices out there, tweeting, buying merch, and tuning in when we're on TV, and inevitably we will get there too.
How cool is it, where AEW's got their relationships with NJPW, WWE's got their relationship with TNA. How cool is it that you get these crossing over of promotions now? I mean, when I was growing up, that would never happen.
Yeah, I think it's exciting. I think that, we're talking about the schedule being lessened, but there's so many more opportunities to potentially go to Japan or to go to Mexico or to work these interpromotional shows where it's like, okay, so you might not be on our main show tonight, but we're going to give you the opportunity to go to Japan and be a part of the G1.
Yeah.
And for some guys that's a lifelong dream that they might not have ever been able to achieve without being at AEW. So I think that it gives talent a lot more opportunities to be in the ring and to show the audience their body of work doing this crossover work. I mean, there's wrestlers that are on CMLL that maybe you've never heard of because they just wrestled in Mexico and you just watched AEW, and you're getting to know all of these CMLL stars now. And I think it's beautiful. I think that being able to work together and not seeing your competition as competition and seeing like, what can we do together if we join forces for the better of our industry? We're watching it live right now.
Do you watch wrestling when you're at home, like on an off day?
Yes. Every day.
Like, do you watch it live, or do you go back? It could be, I guess, old footage. Like, what do you watch?
Yeah, I mean, we watch live. We watch, I mean, wrestling's on every single day of the week. So Raw on Monday, you have NXT Tuesday, we have Dynamite on Wednesday, you have TNA on Thursday, we have, SmackDown on Friday and Collision on Saturday, pay-per-views on Sunday. Like, we're watching live every single day. But then also too, going back and like, we get to the links at AEW to go back and watch our own stuff. So I'm going back and studying my own stuff or seeing what the girls did, just to refresh my mind, of like, oh, did they do that, or who's doing this, or keep up with the stories if I'm not at work, which I've talked heavily about just coming back to work now. So just trying to watch and stay in the know and make sure I know what's going on for when I do get to come back was really important.
When did you fall in love with pro wrestling?
When I was 9 years old.
And what was the moment?
I I want to say it was Stone Cold Steve Austin was hitting Chris Jericho over the head with a chair. I don't know that it was Chris Jericho, but I know it was Stone Cold. And he was wielding a chair, and I was actually grounded. I was not supposed to be watching TV. And I went downstairs, and my brother was watching, and I saw him wield a chair, and I went, and I was hooked. And my brother says I ruined wrestling for him because that was the moment I became obsessed. I was like, first of all, who would do that to someone? I didn't know what wrestling was. So I'm like, who's hitting someone with a chair? Like, that's crazy. But then I needed to know everything about it. I was obsessed from that day forward.
Have you met Stone Cold? I assume yes.
No, we follow each other on Twitter, which is cool. And we've interacted a little bit years and years ago, but that's one person I've not met that I would love to.
Would that be a really big deal?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, also, like, my husband is the biggest Stone Cold Steve Austin fan. So I feel like if I got to meet him without Steve, it would be like perpetual bragging rights for the rest of my life. But I would love, more than me getting to meet him, I would love Steve to get to meet him because that's Steve's hero.
Very cool. Huge moment in pro wrestling last week was the return of AJ Lee. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that if you have any, but also,
Yeah.
do you have a favorite pro wrestling return memory?
Yeah, oh gosh, I don't know about the return. I feel like just off the top of my head, like when Bryan Danielson debuted at AEW, that was
Awesome.
huge.
Awesome.
Really, really cool moment. I'm trying to think. Like, I don't know. You put me on the spot here. I think
Bryan Danielson's debut in AEW was really
was
good.
awesome, right? I think AJ coming back was awesome. And there had been rumblings on the internet about it, so I made sure to tune in. And I mean, she's a Jersey girl through and through. I've read her book. I know her story, and I just am so happy that she feels like she's in a place that she could come back to wrestling. And because, I don't even know how old she is, but she left so young. She was so ahead of her time. And, she's gotten to watch this transition and this evolution of women's wrestling without being a part of it. And I feel like now all of her work, she can reap the benefits coming back. And so it was a really, I don't want to say I got emotional, but there's very few moments in wrestling, I think, as a wrestler where I'm like totally invested and hoping something happens. And just the way they set it up, I was really hoping it would happen. And when it did, I was like, this is cool. This is a really, really cool moment people aren't going to forget for a long time.
I thought it was incredible, and I tweeted this out after I watched it. And, maybe your husband, Steve Macklin, felt some kind of way when you debuted in AEW a couple years ago. And I tweeted out afterward, this has got to be the best moment in CM Punk's life. Not AJ's life, in CM Punk's life. Because you could see him standing there and watching his wife have this incredible moment, and the way that everyone is greeting her, I feel like it was the proudest moment of his life.
I'm sure it was. And obviously I don't want to speak for Steve, but knowing how excited he was for me that I was going to have that moment at AEW, because that was the only thing I wanted. When I talked to Tony about the potential of me coming to AEW and signing a contract, the only thing I had asked for in that conversation was like, hey, the first Dynamite of the new year is in New Jersey. And I don't know if you know, but I am from New Jersey. And so it didn't seem like it was going to happen until like late Tuesday night. And I was a little upset of like, oh, I really wanted this. Like, this would be a dream come true. You know, perfect scenario. But we don't get those. So I just need to let it go. And then I got the call. And I was so happy he could be there. I was so happy my dad was in the front row. Literally, the first face I saw when I looked at Hardcam was my dad, who was crying. My in-laws were there, my stepmother was there, but I think that he watched me like get 100% of what I wanted, you know, and that never happens. It never happens exactly how I want it to happen, and it did for me. So, you know, I felt that way when he won the world championship at TNA. You know, we got to do that together the same night, both win world championships, and I was more nervous and more emotional for him because I had already, not to devalue the fact that I was winning, but I had already won, so I knew what that was going to feel like to hold that championship up. But he had never felt that before, and to know his story and to know the struggles he's been through to get to that moment, it was like, this is the culmination of 13 years of work, and I'm so proud. Like, the most proud I've ever been. I was hysterical, you know, and so I could only imagine that Punk felt the same way.
Pro wrestling's the greatest. Like everything you just said, you know, this is why it's the greatest, Deonna. It's the greatest.
Yeah, it is. It really, really is.
Tell everybody again, Boots to Boots, when it debuts and how everybody can get it.
Yeah, so everyone can follow at Boots to Boots Pod on Instagram. We debut our premiere episode. The Combat Boots is the title. It's all about Steve's story, his journey in the military, why he chose the Marine Corps, and all of the things that went on for him to get out and find professional wrestling. It debuts Monday, the 15th, 8 a.m. sharp. That episode will be up on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
Great job, Deonna. Thanks so much for joining us. I'd love to do it again sometime. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.